So hello traders, welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to talk about how I manage risk as a prop firm trader. I think anyone who's ever tried prop trading knows that all prop firms have caps on how much you're allowed to lose. Often, depending on the programs that you'll choose, you'll find that most cap levels sit at 10%. In fact, my Forex funds, which recently won their case, was the only firm I think which I've ever seen in my years of trading props which had a 12% cap. Other firms that had a deeper drawdown were not as reliable and they ended up going under. However, at least my Forex funds have maintained that 12% cap and never went under. In fact, they just received a case. Anyway, back to the topic. So you'll often find that you have that cap where you're allowed to lose only a particular percentage per day. And also you're allowed to lose only a particular percentage per ultimately, not per anything, but ultimately. Long time ago, there was the idea of time limits, but that was scrapped off as the industry evolved. And right now, if you look at what most firms offer is either a 10% and a 5% daily drawdown, or a 8% and a 4% daily drawdown, or a 8% and a 3% daily drawdown. They'll vary depending on the firms. Like if you look at different firms, for example, if you look at a firm like Funded Next, they have 8 and I think 5, or 10 and 5. I had 10 and 5. If you look at FTMO, they have 10 and 5. If you look at a company that I did like Fivers recently, also has 10 and 5. So if you think about that, there is very little threshold that you're allowed to trade along as a trader, okay? So it's very, very important for you to come up with a strategy or at least a framework that will help you manage risk properly, okay? And what I do is I come up with something called a risk profile, okay? So what a risk profile generally means is what are the known risks that I'm not supposed to breach, because when you're trading, there are known risks and there are known risks.
We're giving you the chance to learn Forex for free at Financial Hub, but there's a little twist to it. All you need to do is find your Paperstone account and boom, you're all in. Deposit $100 and get access to our basic course, perfect for beginners. Or deposit $250 and get access to our exclusive course that is best for advanced traders. Why is this huge? Because you get to learn while you earn. Trade the real money and get real experience. And also you get lifetime access. Once you're in, you're in.
Like for example, if you breach the 5% daily drawdown, you essentially have broken a known risk. Like this is something that you knew if it happens, you will be knocked out of the game. So before you even start trading, you should account for that. Okay. And even if you look at most hedge funds, again, I think there was a hedge fund that I saw as I was reading Market Wizards, whereby the traders are just given a 3% drawdown limit for the year. If you attain that, your capital is cut in half. If you breach that, your capital again is cut, or you're even laid off, something of the sort. So the reason for this is because obviously if you know how trading works, protecting your downside is the most important thing for you to learn. So how do I manage to do that? So I have a couple of strategies that I utilize, okay? Number one is I never ever execute more than 2 positions at a go, okay? Or I never have more than 2% exposed at a go. Why? Because typically my risk reward ratios sit between 1:2 to 1:3, in between there. So sometimes it's 2.2, 2.5, 3, around that threshold, okay? And if I have running profits, okay, so if I take, let's say, 2 trades and they're up both a percentage, then I'm up 2%. Meaning, if those trades were to reverse both of them and they got to my stop loss, I would lose 4%. Okay, I wouldn't lose 2, I would lose 4. Why? Because the previous day, my balance or my equity closed with a 1% profit, but the next day the markets reversed and went all the way to my stop loss. And you see, with such rules, at least I would have been able to avoid being knocked out of the game just because I had 2 losses, okay? I've ever breached that daily drawdown rule once with a 4 traders 100k account, where I overposition sized on Aussie dollar and I ended up losing way more than I thought. In fact, I didn't even know that my daily drawdown at that point was 4%. I had initially thought it was 5 and it was 4. So I lost that account like that. And that taught me that you should always factor in that risk. So that's one, how I manage that risk of the daily drawdown. Okay. The second thing I do is I don't allow my gains to turn. Like, for example, if I have floating profits of about a percentage of about 2% and more, I don't allow that to turn from 2% into direct loss. I'd rather get out at break even, because again, I do give my trades room to maneuver. So I'd rather get out at break even or with a minor loss. And the reason for that is because, again, I'm not only protecting against losing in a particular position, but I'm also protecting against losing the account, which is the most essential thing when you're trading. Okay. The third thing that I do is I normally have threshold limits. Like, for example, if I lose more than 3% in a week, I stop trading. And there are a couple of reasons for that. If you look at how most prop traders lose their accounts, they normally have a period where they trade well and they make gains consistently. But when the losses hit, they normally go into that revenge trading mode, which normally results in them losing their accounts. And it's through losing of these accounts that traders are essentially knocked out of the game. So for me to avoid that emotional decision making and that forcing markets to do what I expect, what I've learned to rely on is the idea of always having a cap. Because if I take a break, one thing I've realized is that, if you have a loss today and you sleep on it, tomorrow you won't wake up with the same loss bugging you. Okay. But if you have a loss today and you keep on looking at markets, there's a high chance you might find yourself doing things that are not in line with your plan and in line with your strategy. This is for also those people who are learning how to trade, but there are also measures which you can put in place. Okay. The second way I use threshold limits is once I lose a particular chunk of my account, I normally cut down my risk. Okay. So I have one for traders account which I've stayed with for more than a year, and that account, essentially the reason I've retained it is because anytime where I went into drawdown, I used to cut the risk. So for example, anytime where I'm between 0 and -4, meaning if I have a 100k account, between 100k and 96,000, I will risk 1% for each position that I take. Okay. But anytime I go below 96,000, then I will cut my risk to 0.5. And anytime I go below 94,000, I will cut my risk again. Why? I'm trying to increase the number of trades, the number of positions that I have before I breach the account. Meaning, if I'm systematically following my plan and I'm trading in line with my system, then it's very hard for me, let's say, to have 8 losing trades in a row or 9 losing trades in a row. Okay. I know that if I follow my plan, I can have 3, 4, 5 losing trades in a row, but not 20. It's quite hard for me to go that far. So by doing that now, I've been able to at least minimize that risk of being able to being knocked out because of the 10%. The third thing that I do is I normally use a risk checklist. So anytime I'm taking a position, I normally ask myself, one, am I comfortable losing this money on this trade? Because I realized most of us, when we spot an opportunity, we normally start from the conversation of how much will I make or how much will I earn. Rarely do we think about the downside. And one thing I've been training myself now for the last actually this is a decision I made like a year or something ago, where instead of thinking about how much you'll make, it's more important to think about how much you're willing to lose, because this will even tell you and warrant you to take some positions. Like, for example, you might find a trade is not worth you losing $1,000. So you might pass on that trade because you feel like this is not a trade worthy for me to lose this much. And you'll realize very quickly that these tiny decisions will save you a lot of money in the long run, because it's only through making these tiny, small decisions consistently that you will be able to consistently make money in the markets. So it's very, very important for you to understand these variables. I've shared with you use of threshold limits. I've shared with you taking breaks. I've shared with you making sure that your daily fluctuations don't take you out. And I think the last one that I will add for you, which is the most important, is for you to know how to effectively size up your trades and to focus on high probable trades. I think by the end of the day, I've realized the biggest risk in trading is not the market, it's you as an individual. So if you don't know how to manage yourself as a trader, and you have not crafted a plan and a process that you'll use to trade, there is a high chance that you will end up losing a lot of money. And also, it's very, very important to just focus on the simple, basic stuff. Often traders try to look for the complex stuff, the things that will that are complex as ways of, let's say, managing risk. But one thing I've realized is that simple things such as just using a stop loss are very effective in ensuring that you trade well and effectively. So with that said, we'll stop there. We'll catch up next time. Peace.